Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Here, I'll just start by saying a couple things we're not going to do in this talk. Okay, so first of all, we're not going to talk about Michael Gambon. I mean, I feel like we've already talked about Michael Gambon. We all pretty much agree about that, and we're just going to go ahead and move on from that. We're also not going to create or promote hierarchies within Harry Potter fandom. I'm not here to tell you that you're not a real fan if you've only ever seen the movies. And I just want to say, I'm not really here to even just say books are period better than movies. I'm not even sure I totally agree with that. Even the book lover that I am. But you're a fan if you say you're a fan. I'm going to believe you if you say you're a fan, okay? You don't have to pass a test. But there is the age-old adage that we have to deal with, which is that the book is always better than the movie that it was based, that you know what I mean. You know what I mean. It's after lunch. So everybody always says the movie's never as good as the book, right? Is this always really the case? I don't know if I agree that it is. So I'm like, movies that come to mind immediately that I've seen, Twilight, I'll say I liked the movie better than the book. I liked the movies better than the books. I recently read and saw The Martian. I honestly got a lot more out of the movie than I did out of the book. And maybe that's a controversial statement, and we probably have a whole different conference on all of these things. But I'm not sure that this is always true. So I want to kind of put it to the test a little bit with regard to Harry Potter, because I do think it's true with regard to Harry Potter. Because I think that the books are richer and more meaningful than the books and than the movies in some significant ways. So I hope that this is helpful to you, and I hope that in some way, either directly or indirectly, it inspires fans who haven't read the books yet to dive in to find out what they've been missing. So first of all, I'll tell you that I have a very complicated relationship with the Harry Potter films. I love the films. I went to see all the films at their premiere. I own all the films. I used to enjoy turning to the films when my need for a Potter fix was great, but my time for rereading a 4,200-page series was short. We've all been there, right? The films are classic. They'll always remain part of my movie collection, but I don't watch them anymore. Actually, I've stopped watching them, almost totally stopped watching them. It's not cold turkey. The turning away from the films that I have experienced started with episode 10 of MuggleNet Academia. Let's give a shout out to MuggleNet Academia. Woo woo. Yep, and that episode featured John Mark Reynolds. And the episode was about what is and isn't Harry Potter canon. In the episode, Reynolds gave his opinion, one which I ultimately adopted, that the films would inevitably serve to date the books, making the story they depict appear as passé as some of the sweaters that Rupert Grint was made to wear. To be honest, after I stopped watching the films, I haven't missed them. For one thing, they can really mess with your understanding of Potter canon. Am I right? Please turn to your neighbor and name one difference between the Harry Potter books and films. Maybe one that bothered you or maybe one that you liked. Either way, no judgment. Go ahead. All right, did you get it done? Come on now, I only get 20 minutes. So here are some differences that I've noticed, and I compiled this list with the help of my Facebook friends. So, there's a lot of random things, like how does Harry learn that his father played Quidditch? Well, in the movie, he learns from Hermione, because he learns most things from Hermione. And in the book, he learns from McGonagall. What does Hermione do to help recover the Philosopher's Stone in the, under the school? She has a whole task that gets left out, which is so sad. Who are the Marauders? That one's in there for Kat. There you go, Kat. Who are the Marauders of the Marauders map? What is spew, for that matter, right? If you only saw the movies, you wouldn't know how to answer these questions. Who gives Harry the gillyweed? We covered that in Professor Ambrose's talk. What does Dumbledore do to protect Harry when they arrive on the astronomy tower after they've been to the cave? I was so struck by the fact that he freezes Harry under his cloak, and Harry's got to stand there and be a witness to what happens. It's such an interesting part of the scenario that gets obviously totally left out. Why exactly does Neville kill Nagini? Is it because Nagini's trying to kill Ron and Hermione, or is it because Harry told him to? What happens to Voldemort's body after he dies? And what does Harry Potter do with the Elder Wand? So it's these last two that I want to deal with in this talk today. But first, let me say, and we could have gone on, by the way, my Facebook friends and I, we may feel our blood boiling when we listen and think about all these differences between the books and the films. But the fact is, it doesn't matter how we feel about it, because for many Harry Potter fans, maybe even most, the films are primary. I love this GIF, or this, whatever this is, because it makes a point, and then it makes another point it maybe wasn't intending to make, which is that, first of all, you see what's going on here. They've aged Snape backwards to the appropriate age he would have been in the books, or something like it. But what they've also done is show that even in their book imagination, it's still played by Alan Rickman. This is a muggle, folks. This man was a muggle. He was a very fine muggle, but he was just a muggle. He was not actually in the books. Yeah. So it's an interesting commentary. Now, I teach college students, and they love to see how much class time they can chew up by asking me digressive pop culture questions. A few times recently, they've asked, which Harry Potter movie is your favorite? They do not seem aware that there's any distinction here. And because I always say, well, my favorite book is, and they're kind of like, oh, okay. I've also experienced this attitude of the films as primary while attending a collegiate Muggle Quidditch tournament. I was seeking an understanding of the viability of Quidditch on its own terms, so I asked a team member of Ohio State's team, I think, if everybody on her team were big fans of Harry Potter, or if some were just kind of playing for the love of the sport. And she informed me that most were indeed big Potter fans, but there were one or two players who, she said, despairing of their poor taste, have never even seen any of the movies. Their attention to the books was not mentioned. So a few weeks after that experience, I was speaking at the Roanoke Harry Potter, the Roanoke Generic Magic Festival, and I was talking about the symbolic nature of Quidditch and the way Quidditch works as a symbol set, and a couple of young people in two different instances within about 5 minutes of each other challenged my assertion that James Potter was a chaser, a Quidditch chaser. They said, James Potter was a seeker, and they were like really trying to be polite, but they were like, you're so wrong about that. I try to explain to them that on the level of symbols, which is the level on which Quidditch operates best, James has to be a chaser because his position corresponds to his role in the larger narrative. He's a member of the Order of the Phoenix. He's a goal scorer, but he's not, in the fight against Voldemort, but he's not a Horcrux hunter, like Harry, like Regulus Black, both of whom are seekers on the pitch and off. We finally figured out where this information was coming from and where this discrepancy was coming from. In 2000, J.K. Rowling gave an interview where she was asked what position he played. Was it seeker like Harry or something else? And she said he was a chaser, okay? So that's where I was getting my information. But of course, my young friends in the audience were getting their information from the film, right? Which misidentifies James as a seeker. Who cares? Who cares? Besides Caitlin Harper and I, who cares what position James played? Well, maybe it doesn't matter, but the way Quidditch is handled, in this particular instance is handled in the books, is sort of emblematic of the way more important elements in Harry Potter are handled by the films, which is with an emphasis on plot, action, and visual effect that disregards or even distorts symbolic meaning. So let me explain with the two examples that I said I was going to explain. So first of all, I want to talk about what Harry does with the Elder Wand. In stories dating back millennia, the trope of a broken weapon and how that brokenness is resolved has strong symbolic significance, especially for the story's hero. A broken weapon is symbolic of the hero's own brokenness, and its restoration corresponds to the hero's sense of wholeness or healing, even to their ability to complete the quest. The fact that Harry's Holly Phoenix wand never gets restored in the films is problematic to this trope. It turns a highly symbolic element of the story into a plot device. Oh, here's some examples of broken weapons in modern stories. It turns a highly symbolic element into a plot device because on a plot level, Harry has to stop using his Holly Phoenix wand and start using Draco's wand in order to be master of the Death Stick. It also ignores the distinctiveness which sets Harry's wand apart, the distinctiveness of Harry's particular brand of power, as it were. The way Harry wields power is symbolized from the first book onward by the properties of his wand. And this is an early indicator that he can be seen as a Christ figure. First, his wand is made of holly, which is a wood associated, especially in English legend, with the cross of Christ, which in turn symbolizes human fragility and the obedient acceptance of mortality. But the core of Harry's wand contains a phoenix feather, a magical symbol of immortality, which in Harry's case is achieved by the old magic of self-sacrifice, which permits him to transcend death. In Deathly Hallows, the book, Harry's temptation to be master of the Hallows is the very obstacle he must overcome in order to heal his own personal brokenness, symbolized by the broken wand. He uses the Elder Wand to fix his own wand, affirming his emphasis, consistent with all the books, on Horcruxes, not Hallows, on a life lived not in fear of death, but in acceptance of it, symbolized by the holly, an acceptance which robs death of its power over the human condition, symbolized by the phoenix. When Harry, in another symbolic act, stows the death stick where it belongs in Dumbledore's tomb, it is because death belongs not with the living, but with the dead. All of this would have taken way too long to shoot. And it wouldn't have been very gratifying from a visual perspective, so out it went. Bye-bye. Second example. In the book, Voldemort dies like this. Tom Riddle hit the floor with a mundane finality, his body feeble and shrunken. Not like this, where he simply flakes away. I haven't heard David Yates' take. I did try to find it, but I haven't really heard David Yates' take on why he chose to depict Voldy's death this way, but I have read speculation that it was part of an overarching depiction of in the film of Voldemort breaking down gradually over the course of the film, and with his death as a culmination of his kind of coming apart at the seams. It's also part of the culminating transition from dark to light that's happening in the background as the sun rises on Harry's victory. But frankly, it makes me feel as if I could be breathing bits of Voldemort right now. And I am not at all sure that that is the effect that the director was going for. In 2007, political philosopher and ethicist Jean Bethke-Elshtain gave a lecture at Notre Dame's Center for Ethics and Culture about the distinctive portrayal of evil in Harry Potter and its consistency with the thought of St. Augustine, especially in its depiction of Voldemort, who personifies evil not as glamorous, ultimately, but as banal. Evil is banal, she says. It lacks depth. It is a flattening of the world through a failure to engage it at its roots. It is nihil. It is a nihilism, said Elshtain. She points out that in the Harry Potter books, evil is not unique, special, glamorous, glorious, although Tom Riddle was arguably all these things as a young man before his quest for the Horcrux, for immortality. Evil is, as Hannah Arendt called it, a fungus which grows on the surface of things. It is a parasite living on the back of some poor professor's turban or off the milk of an enchanted serpent. It is a whimpering thing stashed under a bench at King's Cross Station. This is what Voldemort becomes throughout the 7 books. We see this banality of Voldemort come to its logical end in Rowling's description of the mundane finality of his death, of the feeble and shrunken quality of his inanimate corpse. And yet the film adaptation lends a glamour, an extraordinary quality to Voldemort's death. I see some of you you couldn't take your eyes off it when it was happening. It's glamorous, there's an extraordinary quality to it, but this unfortunately undercuts the consistent depiction of evil at work throughout the series. And why Bellatrix Lestrange gets the same treatment, I can't even quite figure out. Perhaps it seemed fitting to the filmmakers to create a more prolonged moment for Voldemort's death, anticipated as it was through 8 long films. To me, however, one of the most satisfying aspects of Voldemort's final defeat in Deathly Hallows, the book, was the idea of evil's banality being exposed for what it truly is: mundane, feeble, shrunken, utterly bereft of agency. In other words, like this: they moved Voldemort's body and laid it in a chamber off the hall, away from the bodies of Fred, Tonks, Lupin, Colin Creevey, and 50 others who died fighting him. In death, Voldemort no longer has agency. He is disposed of, where he can never, ever hurt or even touch another member of their community again. Nor can bits of him be accidentally inhaled. Oh, I'm saving that. As I said at the onset, I do not wish to belittle Harry Potter film fans, and I don't wish to set up any dichotomies among fans or even really say that movies are lesser than books. You know, I'm just here to say books are awesome, and that you're a real and true fan if you identify as such, period. At the same time, I hope that I've shown today that some of the most powerful symbols and values of the narrative, and I will also say that some of the more religious content, the religious symbolism of the narrative, that the narrative has to offer, are unfortunately and sometimes unintentionally clouded by their film adaptations. Perhaps the old adage that the film is never as good as the book isn't always true, but it does seem especially true of Harry Potter, which itself is a celebration of books, real parchment and ink sort of books. Alexandra Gillespie argues that Harry Potter does something very intentional that Rowling does something very intentional when she fills Harry's magical world with good old-fashioned books, instead of muggle technology like computers and smartphones. Gillespie says, she transforms the book and writing itself back into something magical, just at the moment when, so we've been told, its days are numbered. The old books, quills, and scraps of medieval writing depicted in the Harry Potter novels have much to teach us about the magic that is hidden in books. So let's invite those who haven't experienced the richness of Rowling's Harry Potter books to keep at it, to keep reading these books, even if it takes years and years to finish. It should take years, because reading Harry Potter is like another highly meaningful, symbolic act. It's like going on a pilgrimage, in which the journey is just as important as the destination. Thank you very much.